David, your second lesson from the career of David Langwallner is it Enlightenment values? What are they?
Well, I mean, I suppose I was educated not just as a lawyer, but I studied history in Trinity College,
Mm-hmm.
and I lectured for many years jurisprudence and the philosophy of law. And I've always been intrinsically interested in jurisprudence, and I studied it under people like William Twining and Ronald Dworkin in UCL and the critical legal studies people in Harvard. And so, as a lawyer, I've written about, lectured, issues to do with the relationship between law, philosophy, history, politics, and kind of the paraphernalia that surrounds law. And I'm increasingly disenchanted and annoyed at the way we're breeding lawyers who are technocrats. They have tremendous technical ability, but they don't have any consequentialist understanding of why they're doing what they're doing, or any reflective vocational sense of what they're doing and the consequences it has for other people. They are, therefore, in almost a Dostoevskian sense, they are amoral people. They don't have a moral compass. And
Does it all have to do with the money?
well, we'll come to that. But insofar as I do have a moral compass, then it would be hypocritical of me to say that that moral compass has anything to do with Roman Catholicism. It's a disease from which I'm recovering, which I don't think really institutionally does have a moral compass. I should say before people get freaked out, if there isn't, that there is a distinction, a very firm distinction between Christian decency or Christian socialism, which Pope Francis to some extent reflects, and the nonsense of the Roman Catholic Church. But primarily my set of belief systems, I suppose, influence on my teaching of jurisprudence, my study of history, my wide reading over a long period of time, my writing, has to do with the sense of morality that comes from the Enlightenment. There's been a lot about this recently, and I suppose if you break it down, Enlightenment values are one, a commitment to the utilization of human reason or rationality, as opposed to the forces of irrationality. And we'll come to them. Empiricism. Look at the evidence. Inductive reasoning. What does it mean? What does it mean when they say this? What does it stack up? And in a way, that's what a criminal defense lawyer does all of the time. If someone is accused of something, well, what does this mean? How do you relate this to this? Does it meaningfully amount to something? Commitment to Enlightenment values is also, I think, a belief in, at the end of the Enlightenment is 1700 to 1800, it's about the idea of knowledge, and no reading is entropic, no knowledge is wasted. The more you know, the better you are in a position to make, at any level, an informed decision. And at the end of the Enlightenment, we have the two great constitutions, the Constitution of America and the Constitution of France. And that sets the template for much of the modern world. It is the beginning of what we call human rights. And human rights has become a form of secular religion. I want to come back to that. But it comes ultimately from the Enlightenment, the belief that human beings have dignity in themselves, rights in themselves, and they are not objects to be moved around about a chessboard by external forces. No, and if you look at it in philosophical terms, it is the Kantian idea, Immanuel Kant idea, of people being and actions being good in themselves, or people being things in themselves, as opposed to the utilitarian calculus that people are ends towards means. And I'm anti-utilitarian completely. It is not that I don't see any occasional justification for it, but generally speaking, the right answer, the good answer, the right thing to do is that which is good in itself and bugger the consequences. Now, the Enlightenment commitment to human rights also involves commitment to something we addressed on the last occasion, commitment to truth, and a belief in legality and principles of the rule of law. Now, what does that mean? I suppose it means at certain levels, law should be fair, law should be equal in application, not just formally equal, substantively equal. Judges should not be politically bought or sold. State officials should be on the level and not corrupt. That the system more substantively should show a commitment to human rights. And that means, I think, at another level, something I've written extensively about, that there should be a relationship between legality and morality. That ultimately a law has to be subject to some sort of level of moral evaluation. But we'll come back to that. So all of that kind of influences me. And then, a lot of my heroes fall within that tradition. If you go back to Voltaire, the central figure in the Enlightenment, and you trace it right through people like George Orwell, to the late Christopher Hitchens, or Roland Dworkin, who taught me at UCL, although briefly, but he did teach me, a belief in what might be called secular humanist values. That's me. Now, and there are still people much older, much better than me, who are still advocates for this position, alive. There's Noam Chomsky in Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and there's the German intellectual Jürgen Habermas, who comes from initially a kind of post-structuralist position, postmodernist position, which he's now rejected, and over time has done so. And that's sensible. I don't think Chomsky's ever believed any of that nonsense about post-structuralism. And in fact, a good bridge into all of this is what Chomsky said a couple of years ago. And he was quoted in an interview saying it, and I've cited it several times. It's the most remarkable thing to say. And they came back to him after he said it. Now, Noam Chomsky is the world's greatest, with Habermas, public intellectual, one of the brightest people on the planet. Professor at MIT, for 40, 50 years, maybe more, I don't know. And only in the last year, now he's over 80, so perhaps they thought, well, no, maybe you're overstating this, or you've gone too far, or whatever. He said, the most dangerous organization in human history, now that's the thing they really thought, well, what do you mean by that? Is the Republican Party of America. Why? Because it embraces three values, all of which are anti-Enlightenment values. Post-truth, or the relativity of truth. Religious fundamentalism, which is after all what people like Voltaire were crusading against in the 18th century. And neoliberalism, the unregulated free market. All wrapped up in this toxic time bomb. And that toxic time bomb has led to all sorts of things that are destroying a commitment to Enlightenment values. A lot of the blame, funnily enough, and Chomsky accords this properly, and the left has been disgracefully stupid about this, is they're embracing bullshit from people like Jacques Derrida and Lyotard and all these postmodernist nutbacks on the left bank of Paris in the 1950s and 60s. Truth is not truth. What I say from one minute to another adjusts. Every sentence is capable of multiple levels of meaning. Now, a lot of cigarettes and Gauloises were smoking, and a lot of people had relationships of a significantly unmeaningful nature talking this rubbish. It's extremely dangerous. Because what has happened, I think, is in the law schools of America, the bright, young, smart boys in the top law schools listen to this, and the putatively radical professors were taking it all down. And over time, it morphs into Donald, we don't have to believe in truth, Steve Bannon says to Donald Trump. Just say it's not true. Or say truth is contestable. Or there are two sides to the argument. Or truth is not truth. And if we say it often enough, like the big lie in Orwellian terms, loud enough, and since we control the media anyway, people will, if they don't buy it wholesale, they'll at least be forced to listen to it and think it's an alternative point of view. Now, I don't believe in balanced coverage. There is no such thing. Rubbish should not be given the same airing as truth. creationism is bullshit, Darwinism is fact. There are not two sides to every story. There is no such thing, save in very marginal circumstances, as smoke without fire. It's all a concoction of these mad right-wing people. But the French structuralists are part of the problem. That which starts off as an emanation of the left has now been cleverly taken over by the right to justify it's not stupidity, that is a label thing, to justify their tenuous grasp of the truth, but it's ideologically motivated. And it's also, when I say it's religious fundamentalism, which Chomsky points out, a lot of, obviously, the Republican Party of America are Christian fundamentalists. I come from a culture where there are far too many Catholic fundamentalists. And it is, I think, a couple of things. It's about they believe in themselves as the chosen people or the chosen few. I mean, it's like very narcissistic and ubermensch. Bannon comes from that tradition. And then, coupled with all of this, there is the sense, millenarian sense of, you get this in various people, at the end of days, that because things like climate change and economic growth have destroyed everything, and this is what Bannon's talking about, building cities in the sea for himself and the chosen people to go. And it is almost a sense of unnecessary wish fulfillment about doomsday, which entitles them to do nothing about things they're supposed to be doing, like rectifying climate change or signing these accords or maintaining social services or relating growth to questions of sustainable development. So the Enlightenment has a commitment to the truth, a hatred of religious fundamentalism. Now, this whole notion of neoliberalism is, I'm not anti-capitalist. I'm a moderate. In a way, I'm kind of like a Burkean conservative on one level. I believe in making a few quid ethically, if possible. And we all have to. But the whole neoliberal thing has flipped everything. It has become socialism for the rich, the failed banks, Goldman Sachs, the people who caused all the problem in the first place, bailing them out and inflicting austerity and poverty and destroying people's lives and forcing people into the gig informal economy to earn anything, or, if they want to earn a lot, to serve their corporate paymasters. And then they buy up all the politicians, the transnational corporations, and so on. This agenda is insidious. I mean, only a couple of days ago, and it passed by without the level of outcry it should have. Trump comes over, and he doesn't really understand what the NHS is, ostensibly. But he says that post-Brexit, we have a trade agreement. Nothing wrong with trade agreements, I'm all in favour of them. But we get rid of the NHS as part of the exchange. And no one is really noticing. They mean this. I mean, I don't think, you don't call these people idiots. They are not. They're very bright people. They've worked all of this out. Now, what they're doing is not nice, and it's deeply immoral, but through the use of post-truth, through the cartelization of wealth in their hands and screwing everybody else, through the embrasure of a false superiority and a false religiosity, they have destroyed the values of moderation, civic pride, environmental pride, fairness, the rule of law, human rights, and the whole concept of Enlightenment values. And here's the other clever thing. They've deflected a lot of this into people's obsession with terrorism, jihadism, and Islamic fundamentalism, which is not really the problem in the first place, or not the central problem. That's why I'm committed to Enlightenment values.